State of Cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry. Our top stories.
This week, cannabis reform continues to reshape the legal and economic landscape across the United States and beyond. In Connecticut, state officials cracked down on a brazen cannabis licensing scam, with a lawsuit alleging forged documents and fake government emails used to defraud small businesses. Meanwhile, in New York, regulatory missteps threatened to shutter dozens of legal dispensaries, dealing a blow to the state's social equity goals. And in Texas, lawmakers are locked in a high-stakes clash over whether to legalize or further restrict THC products. But while some states grapple with uncertainty, others are moving forward. Delaware officially launches adult-use marijuana sales, aiming to become the French wine of weed, and Kentucky clears the way for its first medical dispensary. New Jersey opens the doors to public cannabis consumption lounges, while North Carolina begins formal talks about regulation through a new advisory council. In Oklahoma, a fresh push for full legalization kicks off with signature gathering for a 2025 ballot initiative. Nationally, a patchwork of policies emerges as the DEA stalls on rescheduling. The Senate walks back a hemp ban, and attorneys general rally behind federal cannabis banking reform. And across the Atlantic, Slovenia takes bold steps toward both medical and personal use legalization, potentially setting the tone for European cannabis policy in the years ahead. Stay with us as we unpack all of these developments, state by state and story by story.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
This week, the cannabis and hemp sectors face a trifecta of federal policy developments. DEA Chief Terrence Cole has excluded marijuana rescheduling from the agency's priorities, despite earlier promises to act swiftly. Meanwhile, the Senate removed a proposed nationwide ban on hemp-derived THC products, like Delta-8, after Senator Rand Paul fought to protect hemp farmers. But the House still supports the ban, setting up a future legislative battle. At the same time, 32 attorneys general from across the U.S. have urged Congress to pass the Safer Banking Act, which would let state-licensed cannabis businesses access federally regulated banks and payment services. The industry continues to operate largely in cash, exposing workers to crime and making tax compliance harder. With billions at stake, cannabis stakeholders are calling for unified federal reforms before further growth is stifled.
Delaware's cannabis industry is stepping into a new era as adult-use marijuana sales officially launch on August 1st. Governor Matt Meyer and Marijuana Commissioner Josh Sanderlin toured a Milford cultivation site this week, emphasizing the state's focus on quality, safety, and job creation. The governor says Delaware's cannabis will set a national benchmark as the, quote, French wine of weed. The market rollout begins with existing Delaware's medical marijuana operators opening to adult consumers, in a move some critics say gives big players an early advantage. More than 100 additional licenses are expected in coming months, with social equity applicants part of the expansion plan. Meanwhile, lawmakers are weighing in Senate Bill 75, which could override local zoning restrictions for cannabis businesses, potentially speeding up store openings statewide. Delaware's cannabis market is projected to generate over $40 million annually, with workforce training programs already preparing residents for jobs in cultivation, testing, and retail. The launch follows major reforms to the state's medical program last year, broadening access for patients and setting the stage for full adult use legalization.
Want to stay ahead of the smoke in America's evolving cannabis landscape? Subscribe to State of Cannabis Weekly News Digest, your trusted source for fact-checked, nonpartisan cannabis reporting. Each week, we bring you the latest on federal reforms, state laws, industry shifts, and public health developments, all in one digestible episode. Whether you're a policymaker, patient, advocate, or entrepreneur, we've got the information you need to stay informed. Hit follow, give us a like or a thumbs up. Drop a review or leave a comment. Share this episode with someone who cares about cannabis reform. Because in this industry, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival.
Kentucky's medical marijuana program reached a major milestone this week as the state approved its first cannabis dispensary for operation. Governor Andy Beshear announced that the Post Dispensary in Beaver Dam will be the first medical marijuana retail store to open under the state's program, which launched in 2024. While no exact opening date has been set, officials expect the dispensary to begin serving patients this fall. The approval follows the state's first cannabis cultivator license, awarded earlier in July. With more dispensaries and growers expected to come online soon, patients may soon have expanded local access to medical marijuana for the first time in Kentucky.
Oklahoma could soon revisit the question of legalizing recreational marijuana. Beginning August 6th, advocates will collect signatures for State Question 837. It is a proposed constitutional amendment that would make cannabis legal for adults 21 and older. The measure would eliminate excise taxes on medical marijuana, set a 10% tax rate on recreational sales, allow home cultivation, and protect consumers' rights in workplaces, courts, and firearm ownership cases. The campaign is led by Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action, a group that says it has learned from the failed legalization attempt in 2023 and now has broader industry backing. With over 330,000 medical marijuana patients already in the state, organizers believe there is strong grassroots support for change. If the petition drive secures the needed nearly 173,000 valid signatures by November, voters will decide the issue in an upcoming election. For patients, recreational users, and cannabis entrepreneurs, approval of State Question 837 could mean expanded access, lower costs for medical cannabis, and new business opportunities, all within a regulated market designed to protect public health and generate tax revenue.
Texas remains at a legislative crossroads on cannabis. Just days after a push for legalization surfaced in the Texas House, the state Senate has taken a starkly different turn, passing a bill that would outlaw consumable hemp products containing any detectable amount of THC. Senate Bill 5, introduced by Republican Senator Charles Perry, was approved on third reading on Friday with a 21-8 vote. It now moves to the Texas House, where a companion measure, House Bill 5, is already on the table as part of a special legislative session. The bill marks a significant escalation. Instead of capping THC levels in hemp-derived products, SB 5 would ban them altogether, even in trace amounts. That's despite Governor Greg Abbott's recent veto of similar legislation and his continued preference for tighter regulation over outright prohibition. Meanwhile, a very different proposal has emerged. Representative Jessica Gonzalez recently introduced House Bill 195, which would legalize recreational cannabis for adults 21 and older. Her bill outlines a taxed and regulated market, establishes possession limits, and targets retail cannabis sales by late 2026. So, on one side, a proposal to legalize and tax marijuana. On the other, a Senate bill that would criminalize many hemp-derived THC products already on store shelves. It's a legislative collision that reveals the deep political divide over cannabis policy in Texas. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has thrown his support behind SB 5, favoring a hardline approach. Governor Abbott, by contrast, appears to be navigating a more moderate path, one that emphasizes control, not bans. For patients, business owners, and consumers, the stakes are high. Depending on which vision prevails, Texas could either lead or fall far behind in the rapidly changing national landscape around cannabis. If Senate Bill 5 becomes law, the only legal path to cannabis in Texas would be through the state's limited, low-THC medical program.
North Carolina may be inching closer to cannabis legalization after Governor Josh Stein recently signed Executive Order No. 16, creating the Cannabis Advisory Council to explore potential frameworks for regulating both marijuana and hemp. The council, which is made up of lawmakers, health experts, tribal representatives, and advocates, aims to study how legalization could safely roll out in a state that currently lacks comprehensive cannabis laws. Ahead of its first meeting this Tuesday, North Carolinians are invited to submit public comments on cannabis policy issues that matter most to them. The governor says while adults should have the right to choose cannabis, the current unregulated market, where THC products are sold without age limits or clear labeling, poses health risks, particularly for young people. The council is expected to meet regularly until December 2026 and deliver recommendations that could shape future cannabis laws, potentially opening a path to medical and recreational legalization. With 71% of voters supporting medical cannabis and ongoing demand reflected in tribal-run dispensary sales, the council's work could set the foundation for a regulated market that balances public safety and economic opportunity. Meanwhile, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Medical Cannabis Program is still the only way North Carolina residents are able to obtain cannabis legally.
In Connecticut, a major lawsuit has been filed against a company accused of scamming small businesses hoping to enter the state's regulated cannabis market. Connecticut's attorney says that Make Connecticut Better LLC and its principals allegedly promised cannabis retail licenses under a fictional pilot program, collecting tens of thousands of dollars from at least 35 shop owners. The scheme reportedly included forged documents bearing state seals and even a fake email account impersonating a high-ranking Attorney General's office official. State officials say as many as 70 businesses may have been targeted. The state is seeking a $2.5 million asset freeze to ensure victims can be compensated if the case succeeds. Connecticut's cannabis program requires strict licensing and testing to protect consumers, and this alleged fraud highlights the risks faced by entrepreneurs navigating a competitive and complex regulatory process. Authorities are urging businesses to verify all license offers directly with state agencies to avoid falling victim to similar scams.
New York's cannabis industry, already navigating lawsuits and a slow rollout, is now reeling from a regulatory oversight that could shutter dozens of legal dispensaries. The State Office of Cannabis Management has admitted it incorrectly measured how far stores are from schools and churches, as part of a 500-foot rule meant to protect public spaces. The revelation impacts 152 dispensaries, out of which nearly 90% are tied to social equity programs, with 60 already operational. Governor Kathy Hochul has set aside $15 million in emergency funds to help businesses relocate and promised to seek legislative fixes. But unless lawmakers step in to grandfather in these stores, affected shops will need to move to compliant sites or risk losing their licenses. This latest setback highlights persistent challenges in establishing a stable, fair cannabis market in New York and could push consumers back toward the thriving unlicensed market if closures proceed.
New Jersey's cannabis market is taking a big leap forward with the opening of its first 4 state-approved cannabis consumption lounges. Until now, public consumption of marijuana was prohibited, leaving many with limited legal options. Now, adults can enjoy cannabis safely in lounges located in Atlantic City, Merchantville, and Newark. These lounges provide a bar-like atmosphere, minus the alcohol, complete with smoking accessories, entertainment, and community events. State regulators see this as a major milestone in cannabis legalization, with industry advocates predicting that these spaces will boost tourism and set the stage for broader adoption of social cannabis use across the East Coast.
Meanwhile, in an exciting development in Europe, Slovenia has taken 2 major steps toward cannabis reform this summer. Last month, lawmakers passed a comprehensive medical cannabis law, creating a framework for licensed cultivation, production, and prescription access for patients. Cannabis will be removed from the country's list of prohibited substances within 90 days, and patients will receive dedicated cannabis cards for streamlined access. Just days later, legislators introduced a separate proposal to allow adults to grow up to 4 cannabis plants, possess small amounts for personal use, and share cannabis with others. Commercial sales would remain illegal, but routine workplace THC testing would be banned. These developments follow a 2023 referendum in which Slovenian voters overwhelmingly supported both medical and adult use legalization. Experts say the reforms could significantly improve patient care, reduce black market reliance, and potentially create a domestic cannabis market worth over €55 million by 2029, making Slovenia a model for other European nations considering legalization.
The cannabis world is changing fast, and the State of Cannabis Weekly News Digest is your anchor in the storm. Every week, we break down the top national stories in under 15 to 20 minutes, helping growers, patients, retailers, and reformers make sense of the shifting landscape. If we've helped you make better decisions, take a moment to like, follow, review, and share the podcast wherever you are consuming it with someone who needs to hear the truth. This industry is growing. Let's grow smarter together.
This was the State of Cannabis News Digest, available weekly. You can listen to us on all main podcast platforms. To make sure you don't miss out on the latest updates and in-depth analysis of the cannabis industry, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. By subscribing, you'll get notifications for each new episode, helping you stay informed and ahead in the ever-evolving cannabis market. Join us next Saturday for more insights. Until then, keep thriving and stay green.